Chapter 2 Makalawena Beach. When the door opened a few moments later, I was swept up into a house full of busy, buzzing energy. Within minutes of meeting him, Josh regretted to tell me that he wouldn't be around at all during the time he agreed to host me. He and a good friend had decided to hike Waipio Valley. Yet he assured me that his mother and brother would be around all weekend, so there wouldn't be any problem. He gave me a quick tour of the house, which was small, with 2 floors, and a cute backyard with clotheslines strung over potted flowers. They even had a little guest room for couch surfers, so I was quite lucky. Josh excused himself to find some supplies he needed for his hike, and I took that opportunity to get to know his friend a bit. We got on the subject of beaches, and he told me that the best beach on the west side of the island wasn't too far away. All I had to do was hitchhike up to a certain mile marker and take a dirt road toward the ocean. At the end of the road, he said that there was a pristine white sand beach. Even better, because all beaches were public property on the island, I could walk along it without worrying about trespassing. The thought of this heavenly beach filled me with a fresh excitement. I pulled my smaller day pack out of my Osprey pack and loaded it up with a few supplies, put on some swim trunks and a new shirt, and bid Josh and his friend farewell. Soon I was back beside the highway and stuck out my thumb once more. Curiously enough, my memory of this hitchhike is fuzzy, probably because my ride and I didn't speak much. Or perhaps I was too caught up in the strange landscape of dark lava fields all around me to notice. We passed the airport road I'd walked down just hours before. Then we passed 2 tan hills that looked like large breasts, a landmark that would be useful later on. The driver, an older woman who was concerned for my safety, dropped me off at the mile marker, and I found the unmarked dirt road without much trouble. I assured her that I'd be fine, and began the half-hour trek down the dry, rocky road. I quickly realized that the road split off at a few points. Josh's friend hadn't mentioned that, and I wasted some time taking a road up a small ridge, only to find myself at a dead end, with a stellar view of the ocean in the distance. After retracing my steps, the road became increasingly rocky and narrow. I passed an empty Jeep with a sign apologizing that the Jeep had broken down and that the owner would return soon. Still the rocky path stretched on, small trees flanking either side. I looked up. Although it was only about 6 p.m., the sun was nearing the horizon. I'd have to keep an eye on that. When I reached the water, I found a collection of angular, dark rocks interspersed with sand the color of salt and pepper. The waves crashed against them, kicking up the brisk scent of salt into the air, but there was no beach in sight. I followed the edge of the water past piles of black lava rock until I came to a few calm pools within the formations, cumulus clouds reflecting on their serene surfaces. Eventually I came to a wide gate with a sign that warned people not to block the entrance, indicating that it was the caretaker's property. Caretaker of what? I had yet to learn. There was also a no trespassing sign that had been partially painted over, but as I read it, several people walked around me, ignoring the sign. Were they locals or tourists? Whoever they were, they had a relaxed attitude towards signage. So I shrugged and followed them through the half-open gate and continued following the coast until I saw my first glimpse of white sand farther up. Then I noticed a pond just to my left that was so dark and green that it drew my eye, sporting layers of lumpy moss and a depth marker planted firmly within the slimy-looking water. It appeared utterly devoid of fish. I continued around a bend, finding a larger area of white sand interspersed between chunks of black rock. This patch of sand formed a small beach. It was acceptable, but something pushed me onward. After all, the farther I went, the fewer people I saw, and I wanted to see how far I could go. I pressed forward until the sight ahead took my breath away. Before me was a perfectly pristine patch of white sand, easily the most beautiful spot I'd ever seen in my entire life. Magnificent cyan waves crashed upon the smooth, luxurious beach, and not a soul was in sight. It was perfection. I set my day pack down beside a sandy ridge, kicked off my shoes, and ran directly into the waves, letting the warm ocean wrap itself around my body. I had begun my day in the Bay Area, watched California's green coast shrink into the distance, and marveled at the Big Island peaks rising above the clouds during my approach. And now I was here, walking on a pristine beach that felt like it was out of a dream. As I swam in the ocean for the first time in many years, it finally hit me. I had made it. This was Hawaii. I traveled over 6,600 kilometers, and everything had gone smoothly. I was really here, and it was breathtaking. Now coasting along on an emotional high, I made my first big mistake. I looked around and realized that both my shoes and day pack, with my camera inside, were in plain sight. I decided that if I wanted to swim without any worry of theft, hiding them would be a good idea. I snapped a few photos before picking up my stuff and finding an ideal spot within the black rocks on the far edge of the beach, where my day pack wouldn't be easily seen. I surmised that if I walked on the lava rocks very carefully, I would be okay. I tested that idea, and I felt fine. My feet seemed just fine as long as I walked especially carefully. I wasn't going to put my shoes back on until I was done swimming. After all, it would be hard to get them back on with wet feet. Once I hid my valuables, I felt better and explored the far edge of the beach where some lava rock had formed a beautiful shallow pool that could shield me from the waves. This water was warm too, and I carefully stepped onto the edge and then into the pool. Since the bottom of the pool was sandy, I felt comfortable inside with only bare feet. No one was around, and I closed my eyes, letting the peaceful sound of the crashing waves and the feeling of the warm water soothe my soul after my long journey to reach that singular place. When I opened my eyes again, I was confused to see something clouding the water. I looked closer and realized that it was blood. Once I was convinced that it was most definitely my blood and that I had cut myself on the lava rock, I couldn't stop the words stupid, stupid, stupid from looping in my head like a destructive mantra. It was my first day on the island, and I'd already hurt myself. With greater care than before, I crossed over the black rocks to the beach and examined my feet, finding a gash in the bottom of my foot near my heel. It didn't look deep enough to require stitches, but it was certainly bleeding enough to demand immediate attention. How could I have been so careless to even attempt to walk on lava rock? Then again, I'd never encountered such rock before. It was deceptively sharp, but most of the time, it didn't hurt to step on it. If I was superstitious, I might have said that the rock had a will of its own, but the likelier possibility was that the danger depended entirely on the angle of pressure and the texture unique to each rock. In any case, I shouldn't have taken the risk. Not out there. Not so far from town, anyway. By some stroke of luck, I'd brought a paper towel and some food in a plastic bag. Those supplies would be able to sustain me long enough so I could hitch back to Josh's place. They would have to be. After thoroughly rinsing the wound with some water I'd brought, I wrapped it in the paper towel and put my foot in the plastic bag. Hopefully, the bag would prevent any blood from leaking into my shoes. I still had a long, rocky trek back to the highway, and the sun was setting faster than I'd ever seen it move before. Of course. Since I was so close to the equator, dusk and dawn would be shorter here. Stupid, stupid, stupid. I hobbled back over the black rocks toward the gate with the sign that we'd all ignored earlier, asking everyone I encountered if they were perhaps heading back to the highway. No one was. Thankfully, a few kind people gave me some alcohol wipes and a better plastic bag, but no one was heading out. As I walked, I heard a small squishing sound with each step. I wanted to believe that it was some salt water in the bag making the sound, but I knew better. The wound had bled beyond its wrapping. The bag was slowly filling up with blood, and there wasn't anything I could do about it. Dusk fell quickly, and after asking a few more people if they were heading back to the highway, I realized that literally everyone still near the beach was camping there for the night. Not only would I have to walk all the way back as the plastic bag filled with blood, but it would be dark before I got there. I had to get to the highway. If I didn't clean the wound properly and get a real bandage over it, I faced the very real risk of infection. Pushing these thoughts out of my mind, I plodded along, feeling a sickening squish every time I took a step. Concern swept over me again. What if it got infected? I stopped myself. I'd rinsed the wound thoroughly and cleaned it with an antiseptic wipe. I would be okay. Think positive. It would be fine, just fine. A half hour and a world of daylight later, I neared the highway, momentarily excited by a pair of rear lights in the distance. Perhaps they would see my sorry state and save me some walking. In the darkness, I mustered up the energy to run after the vehicle, but it didn't slow down at all, cruising down the rocky road and disappearing down the highway in seconds. All of my running had been in vain, and I took a moment to catch my breath after such a futile dash. By the time I reached the highway, the stars filled the sky, and with great annoyance at my own bad planning, I stuck out my thumb. I turned up the brightness on my iPod screen and tried to use it to illuminate my outstretched hand, but my little rectangle of light was ignored. I always disliked hitchhiking at night. Lower visibility makes accidents more likely, and one doesn't get picked up as fast. Then again, I was still new to hitchhiking on the Big Island. Perhaps it was different here. In a stroke of luck, a sports car zoomed over to the side of the road ahead of me. I'd only been waiting about 5 minutes alongside an unlit road, a highway no less, and someone had stopped for me. Remarkable. I approached the car, paying close attention to what my intuition was telling me. Inside the car was a guy who appeared to be in his 20s and seemed friendly. More importantly, it felt right, so I sat down. Most of his dashboard glowed in fine red lights, and the stereo was jamming to island reggae. The guy turned to me and smiled, his dark eyes glinting in the light. "What's up, brah?" I hesitated. "Well, I hitchhiked up here, and it got darker faster than I thought it would. I'm staying with a friend in Kona. Where are you headed?" "I'm headed to Kona." He smiled again and pulled ahead, sending us zooming down the 2-lane highway. "I'm Russell. What's your name, brah?" "Andrew," I said. "This is my first day on the island, actually." "Ha! Welcome to Hawaii, man." Russell drove as if the roads were his own, taking turns at twice the speed I'd consider safe, and the G-forces were palpable. I considered my foot, still bagged inside my shoe. That's all I need, I thought. My heart rate to go up. The possibility of a blood-soaked shoe flashed into my mind, but I pushed it away. I had to stay positive. As our conversation continued, I learned that he worked at a nearby resort, and I described my destination in more detail to avoid any misunderstandings. In the night, landmarks zipped past us like specters, and the roads looked unfamiliar to me. I briefly wondered if he misunderstood my directions, yet despite his tendency to drive with the kind of reckless abandon usually reserved for off-road racing, we somehow arrived at my destination unscathed. In fact, I scarcely believed that we arrived as quickly as we did. I'm not sure if it was the blood loss or the jet lag, but if he had told me that he knew a secret route to the south end of Kona, I would have believed him without hesitation. He zipped up to the house with confidence. "This the place?" I nodded, noticing the Jeep still parked out front. "Definitely." I picked up my small brown day pack and waved him farewell, thanking him profusely before waddling back into Josh's house. I followed the familiar stairs up to the living room, calling out to see if anyone was home. To my surprise, a woman with freckles and a warm smile appeared at the top of the stairs. She introduced herself as Jeanette, Josh's mother. I explained to her what happened. "Oh my goodness," she said. "I'll get you some bandages." She hurried around and graciously got me bandages and everything I needed to care for the wound, including a hydrogen peroxide sprayer and a towel. Jeanette also gave me a short lecture on the dangers of getting Staphylococcus aureus, a bacterial infection that is common everywhere but thrives in tropical environments like Hawaii. It would not be the last time I got a staff lecture. I stepped into the bathtub and dismantled my ad hoc wrapping. My suspicions had proven correct. The bag had torn, and blood had oozed into my shoes. I grumbled at the sight and peeled the paper towel off of my foot, causing more blood to ooze out. I sighed, threw the paper and other wrapping into the garbage, and washed off. The bleeding had mostly stopped, and the feeling of the fresh water on my skin felt wonderful. I rinsed with cold water and sprayed the gash with the hydrogen peroxide bottle Jeanette had given me. The wound stung as it bubbled vigorously, and after a few moments, I dried it off with some toilet paper and bandaged it. The wound wasn't as large as I'd imagined, but it was at least 3 millimeters deep. I'd have to keep an eye on it. After drying off and getting dressed, I felt reborn. Jeanette offered me a snack, and we each sat on the bar stools across from the living room, talking up a storm. She apologized that Josh would be gone for the weekend, but assured me that she and Josh's brother would be around if I needed anything. She told me how she'd lived near the Rocky Mountains before Hawaii, but once she moved to the islands, she never looked back. We talked well past 9 p.m. until she said she was getting sleepy. Was it really that late? The pure excitement of the adventure had filled me with energy, and I didn't feel tired at all. I said goodnight to Jeanette and picked up one of the books nearby, a blue guidebook called Hawaii, the Big Island Revealed, that I would later learn was the most famous guidebook on the island. And I read in silence until I heard someone coming up the stairs a short while later. It was a young woman named May. She was a friend of the family and wondered if anyone was around. I told her about Josh's trip and that his mom had already gone to sleep, so we went out to the balcony to talk. She was surprised to hear that I'd come all the way from Wisconsin and shared her love of the islands with me. After talking for a while, she paused and stared at me, sizing me up. "Would you like to come on a volcano adventure with me? Some friends and I are going out to Kilauea tomorrow. You're welcome to join us." My eyes widened. I hadn't even been on the island for 24 hours, and I had already been invited to the best island adventure I could imagine. "Yes," was my immediate response. As we talked further, I learned that her friend Ganymede had worked for the U.S. Geological Survey and knew a way to get right up to the edge of Halemaumau, a huge lava caldera within Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. Basically, we were going to hike up to a lava lake that was right over the Kilauea volcano itself. And later, we would all spend the night at her family's one-room cabin in the nearby town of Volcano. Yes, there's really a town named Volcano. May warned me that I'd have to get up pretty early. The drive to the southern part of the island would take over an hour, and they wanted time to have a little picnic beforehand. I assured her that wouldn't be a problem, and thanked her for inviting me on such a rare adventure. "No problem," she said. "You seem cool." I thanked her and said goodnight, setting my iPod alarm before I passed out. There was no way I would be late for a volcano adventure. After all, I had wanted to see lava my entire life, and now that dream was about to become reality.